kick right into the Canadian recording. What up, YouTube? Jumping right into it here on the News Underground. TM. Very original name. We're jumping into our Canadian news. Probably should have had this ready. Love me some Tucker, though. Need some sexy Eminem talk. These guys are such hypocrites. And I actually have a couple examples, thanks to Woke Patriot, of right-wing projection, right? It's like every accusation is projection. Oh, yeah. If you're left alone with some kids, you're gonna rape them. No, I won't. Why would you think that? Well, if you dress up like a lady, you're gonna. No, they don't. You know who rapes kids? Right-wing Catholic priests in small towns. Yeah, exactly, Dravenslow. Oh, yeah. Well, if there wasn't a law against raping a woman, if there wasn't a biblical law, people would just be going crazy, huh? No, they wouldn't. Why would you think that? Is that what you're going to do? No, I would never do that. But you heathens, you liberals are heathens. You'd do that immediately. No, we wouldn't. It's literally that easy, folks. Do you want 2-3 hours of that? Shooting fish in a barrel, pointing out the hypocrites? We do have a couple articles, but we're not going to focus the whole show on it. All right, let's jump into it. Canadian news. So the big scandal here that Pierre Poilievre, the right-wing opposition to Trudeau's Liberals, are, the big scandal is that we had some, we possibly had Chinese government interference in our elections, and it might have been done through the Trudeau Foundation, which is not good. Not good. The guy was like a friend to Trudeau. It was a whole thing. Like before stuff started to heat up with China, Canada's real estate boom has been massively driven by Chinese immigration, and and people have been made into billionaires because of Chinese nationals coming in, buying property, not even living here, but just like parking money here. It's a whole thing. Liberals have been stuffing their pockets, right? So the scandal is that the Liberals, the opposition, are demanding what is called an inquiry, which is like a full investigation with actual teeth. No, we can't do that. No, we should do a fake January 6th style commission where it doesn't have any teeth. No one's really forced to show up to any interviews. And then at the end of the day, we basically just throw our results in the fucking trash because we're losers. That's what we should do. Well, guess what the Liberals have proposed, folks? Guess what the Liberals have proposed in Canada? They would prefer to do something called a special rapporteur, which has never been done in Canada. It's a brand new thing. You might have heard the word because it's done in like the UN or something. It's basically a person that doesn't have any real teeth. It's kind of made up out of the blue. The Liberals are trying to say that the special rapporteur's investigation is going to be enough. And then that's going to be good. Meanwhile, guess who's the person that they put in charge of this? Trudeau puts, because he's appointed. He doesn't get to be picked by a panel or anything. He's appointed. And guess what? Loyal friend of Justin Trudeau, a member of the Trudeau Foundation, biased up and down, man. The neoliberals in Canada are pushing it too fucking far, okay? And they're opening it up for conservative grifters like Pierre Poilievre, who's guess what, folks? Guess what his idea to fix everything in Canada? Privatize everything. Yeah, go fucking figure. We've all heard the song before. Same song and dance as every other conservative on every other fucking country, right? Same shit. You got a system that's working, but it's not working perfect. Well, okay, let's privatize it. Right? Health, education, what you name it. The conservatives are trying to privatize all of it. And if you don't believe me, just look at what Doug Ford is up to. Oh, gee, Lee back in this motherfucker. Sorry, we missed you right at the very end there, Lise. Bad luck on that one, but trying to do more streams in the middle of the week. Try to keep them tight, try to keep them quick. So, all right, so let's jump into this. This is a lengthy debate. We're gonna bump it up to 1.25, and I'm sorry if that bothers you. Let me know if that is just driving you fucking bonkers. Okay, we can turn it down back to normal, but I want to try to get through all this because obviously I'm digressing a million fucking times. All right, so let's get back to it. By the way, welcome back, Leon, as well. We got back from work. We're so busy. We were short staffed. My manager get a big bottle of Coke for tomorrow. You have the center party and the right wing party. Yeah, so we have the liberals and we have the conservatives. And then we also have a very, a pseudo progressive party called NDP that is in a pseudo alliance with the liberals, but is gaining more and more traction as the liberals slip up. What is interesting to me is that we're seeing an increase of interest in the NDP versus the phenomenon that you see in the United States, whereas, people just, they perceive that they only have two choices. Really, they have three, though, which is, stop engaging or join the other side. And a lot of people just choose to stop engaging, but some go to the other side. These weirdos called independents in the United States. Anyway, let's get to it. Jump on it.
Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Here's what's at issue.
Okay, I already hate this. We're going to slow this down back to normal. Okay, sorry.
This week.
We as a committee have decided that he should be appearing. He's been very receptive to appearing.
David Johnston has agreed to appear before MPs to face their questions about why he didn't call for a public inquiry into foreign interference. The opposition parties agree an inquiry is necessary.
So this is Pierre Poilievre, Conservative Party, and this is Jagmeet Singh of the NDP. Trudeau is somewhere in here, I'm sure.
But they are divided over how far they should push to force one.
If Jagmeet Singh decides for once to do his job and work for...
He's such a dick. I mean, he really is. He's one of the most smug pricks I've ever seen in my life. Fucking Ted Cruz over here taking notes on how to be a smug prick from this guy. I swear to God, dude, most punchable face ever. The looks on his face, the smugness radiates, dude. It boggles my mind that this guy is put in a leadership position. He is such a crony. He is such a stooge. You know what I mean? He has henchman vibes. And yet we're putting him in a position of leadership, conservatives. And this is why most Canadians don't take you seriously. I'm supposed to be attracted by this? He's the smuggest motherfucker I've ever seen in my life. I mean, way up the top 10 smug.
Canadians, instead of working for Justin Trudeau, then Parliament can force Trudeau to hold a full public inquiry.
We're going to look at other tools to continue.
But he's 100% correct on this one. So what the fuck are you going to do about that one? Good job, Justin Trudeau. You just made the smuggest motherfucker on planet Earth correct. What are you doing with this, right? And Jagmeet Singh can't go along with this, and keep his credibility, So he's got this partnership with the liberals who, the whole thing was over dental care, and I think that has happened now. So maybe Jagmeet Singh can leverage this coalition a little harder and be like, yeah, well, we might bounce, dog. How about we do a real inquiry here, instead of beating around the bush.
Can force Trudeau to hold a full public inquiry.
We're going to look at other tools to continue to push for a public inquiry. We think that is so essential and so important right now.
So instead of doing what Pierre Poilievre is doing, which is, getting in your face, these guys are trying to look for other ways to kind of force an inquiry. They're trying to, give the liberals an out on this one. It's pretty obvious in my eyes what the hell's going on here. And quite frankly, this is your opportunity. You should have what I would have done in Jagmeet Singh's case. I would have set a hard deadline to say, look, if we don't have an inquiry by next week or something, we're going to start the process of reconsidering this alliance that we have, and we're going to start the aggressive campaigning for an inquiry, and maybe he would eventually get there. But Canadian politics is nice. It's fucking gross. They're nice to each other sometimes, but it's not niceness. It's corruption. It's corruption masquerading as niceness. But it is what it is.
So should the NDP pull their support for the Liberals over this? Can the opposition parties pressure the government to hold an inquiry? Let's bring in At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Althea Raj, Andrew Coyne, and Kelly Kratterman is joining us tonight from Calgary, where I am as well, because we'll talk about the election coming up as well. Andrew, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, we talked Tuesday about what David Johnston said. I'm wondering in the couple of days since then whether you've seen any indication that the government may have to change course, or whether the opposition parties feel they have a fighting chance in getting them to do that.
I don't think they feel like they have to change course at this point, particularly because the NDP looks like they're not going to hold their feet to the fire on this. Mr. Singh is taking a sort of a middle path, I think a relatively creative one, of saying, I'll go in and look at these documents that Mr. Poilievre refuses to look at, but I want assurances that if I do so, I'll have some sort of freedom to be able to speak my mind if I don't like what I see, if in fact they don't back up what Mr. Johnston has said. All that being said, we're still in this position where we're putting the onus on the opposition to disprove Mr. Johnston's report, his findings, rather than, I think, the onus which should be on the government. We're still in this process where, let's put it this way, if the government was actually interested in rebuilding trust, where we got a story here where they've been alleged to have benefited from interference by a foreign power to their benefit, I would think a government in that position would be going out of its way to show that this was a completely open and above-board process. It would, at the very least, have.
But what Pierre Poilievre is banking on is that there's some clear evidence and they know it, and that's why they're doing all this bullshit, right? But amazingly, he hasn't come out and said it. At least he's not saying it in every time he's in front of a microphone, right? But that's the strategy here: is that there is some shit, and if a real inquiry was done, they'd dig up some real shit.
Got as a rapporteur somebody who had no connection to the Prime Minister or the government or the Liberal Party or the Trudeau Foundation at all. Instead, they did the opposite there. But more than that, they would be getting somebody who was absolutely acceptable to the opposition parties. When you're talking about something that is a breach of trust potentially between the parties, that seems to be absolutely above and beyond. They should be the one who have the onus on them rather than the opposition to play ball with the government.
Though it seems to me, Chantal, that David Johnston was actually saying the onus is on Parliament to do its job for parliamentarians. But I take Andrew's point that it's more up to the opposition parties to agree to that. But what do you think about how the government should rebuild trust given what has happened?
Well, before I go to the government, I'm going to go to Jagmeet Singh. I think he is taking a responsible path and looking for answers.
These Canadians.
And giving himself or making sure he has the freedom to say, this is what I saw, not going into specifics, breaching national security.
Look, you got to understand something, though. The Canadian voting public appreciates these kind of conciliatory actions. They actually do, in some cases.
Right. I also believe, despite the position of Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Blanchet, that it is totally possible to go look at this annex and these facts and to still believe that a public inquiry or an inquiry of some kind is necessary to rebuild trust. I'm skeptical about the notion that you will not want to know what you could know, but you will go in the House of Commons next week, if you're Pierre Poilievre or Yves-François Blanchet, and present the government with constructs of your own that are not based on the entire picture. I also believe that once you...
There's no fucking way this process is not biased. This special rapporteur, whatever he's going to do, there's no way.
Taken into account all the facts and the big picture, a normal opposition party should still be able to find grounds to question the government's course of action.
Isn't that kind of the point, though, Althea, that if Pierre Poilievre, if he feels he goes to see the documents, that he feels in some way he won't be able to attack the government in the same way if he's actually seen what David Johnston's talking about?
So on Jagmeet Singh, I think, frankly, is like the only person that seems kind of statesman-like on this whole issue. The fact that you would have an opposition leader who chooses not to get sworn in, not to see the evidence or the supporting document that has fueled this whole discussion, because you cannot separate in your own head what is classified information versus what is not classified information is ludicrous. Like, I think we talked about this on Tuesday, but you know, the Prime Minister is capable of doing this. The Minister of Public Safety is capable of doing this. Everybody who works at CSIS is capable of doing this. You should want to know what is at the source of this.
Not if it's a cover-up.
Yes. I mean, David Johnston
Not
is
if it's
even
a cover-up.
asking you, please say publicly if you disagree with my findings. So it makes no sense. And to have, you know, the Bloc Québécois leader calling it a trap, Mr. Poilievre saying that he will not be silenced, this is just stupid. I don't know what else to say about it. And Jagmeet Singh, you know, it's a nice lob that Mr. Poilievre is trying to suggest to Mr. Singh to basically have an election over this issue. But do Canadians care more about free dental care, or do they care more about whether or not the government turned a blind eye to foreign interference? I think Mr. Singh is betting that more Canadians care about getting access to dental.
I think enough people give a shit about this that it's going to affect the election if this isn't handled correctly. But I also agree with the premise that if you ask Canadians, you know, what's your top 3 priorities, this probably wouldn't be number 1 on the majority. But I do think it's important enough to sway the election.
Dental care.
Chantal, quickly, and then I'll get Kellyanne. Yeah,
But do Canadians care that the opposition leaders who would present them with a rationale for having an election over this would have wanted to know all the facts that they could have known? The notion that Pierre Poilievre will not be able to attack the government if he goes and finds out what the big picture looks like is kind of saying, I don't want to know more because it allows me to say just about anything I want. I don't think that advances the debate in any way, shape, or form.
The only reason the opposition leaders are in that position is because Mr. Johnson has ruled out a public inquiry. If there was a public inquiry, the opposition leaders would not be having to answer these questions.
But that is where we are now.
Because they wouldn't know anything in a public inquiry either.
Let's get Kellyanne.
Jagmeet Singh might be taking the high road in this, but why does he have to? Why does he have to figure out that road? Why isn't there a path that is well laid out for opposition leaders to get this information? And he's having to have a back and forth with the Prime Minister's office on this. And again, I don't think it's up. I do think that if I was an opposition leader, I would be interested in this information, but we don't know what parameters will be put on learning this information. We don't know what the federal Liberals will throw back at the opposition leaders once they are led into this. And again, I think it comes back to the onus being on this government, and this also being a case of partisan political interference. And that is the problem with all of this.
Yeah, quickly, Althea.
Sure. I'd also like to point out that this dental care stuff was promised by the Liberals in their election. And they have to be forced by the NDP to keep their promise. And they might be leveraging their promise to the people. Can you imagine a party that sleazy? These neoliberals, I tell you, that sleazy. They promise dental care, and they're, going to use dental care as a, bargaining chip with the NDP. To push the NDP to not push for a public inquiry into what is obviously corruption, allowing a foreign government to interfere with the elections. That's nasty.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to public inquiry. I've come and I believe that this is frankly the better way for the public, for Mr. Johnson, for the government. I would not be surprised if the Liberals actually try to get rid of Mr. Johnson as to have another person overseeing the public hearings in the fall. But I would just like to say that this whole discussion over the opposition leaders and whether or not they'll get sworn to secrecy has kind of taken away from some of the findings of facts that are actually in Mr. Johnson.
I don't give a shit that you don't give a shit about Canadian politics, everybody. Welcome to the News Underground. We do all the news.
Johnson's report.
Not just the trendy
real
stuff.
Questions to be talking about that Mr. Johnston has uncovered.
This is huge news.
Andrew, 20 seconds, then Chantal.
Just to be critical of Mr. Poilievre, when a government is behaving as furtively and and not reaching out and not building public trust the way that this government is, that is the time it behooves an opposition leader to take the high road, to be the statesman. And the fact that he's turned what are legitimate concerns and questions into what look more, in his mouth, ugly and partisan, means he's basically giving the government a free ride.
Chantal.
I agree with Andrew on that point. I also agree with Althea that the government probably would like, and I believe Mr. Johnson should have, if he'd not been tone deaf to the political audience, said someone else needs to do the rest of this path, not me.
Welcome to another round of At Issue. Albertans getting ready to head to the polls this Monday in a tightly contested race.
This election is a choice between a united Conservative Party that's lowered taxes, balanced the budget, and returned Alberta to its place as the economic powerhouse of Canada.
Yeah, fucking right.
Or we can choose to go backward with the NDP and their recycled policies.
In this election, I urge you to vote to make sure the values we share, the sensible, stable, moderate values of Alberta's majority, are reflected in our government.
So what could be the outcome on Monday, and what impact could this election have on the rest of the country? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Althea, Andrew, and Kelly Kreiderman, who's in Calgary, as am I. Kelly, you can start us off. This does appear to be an unusually tight race for this province, and I wonder what you think that might be due to.
It is, absolutely, but this is also, only the second election that we've had with a united Conservative Party, partially created by Jason Kenney. It's kind of, we haven't seen anything like this. We haven't seen, this is another rare election where the NDP is actually in contention when, that certainly didn't exist even 10 years ago. So we're breaking. There's a lot of precedent-setting things, and it's really interesting about how close it's been, and how the race has gone over this past month, of course, kind of muted by the wildfires and ups and downs with the parties. I think things were really set about a week ago when we heard the ethics commissioner's report and when the debate happened. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to Conservatives this week, they're feeling some wind in their sails because of the debate, because Danielle Smith, who has been portrayed by the NDP, by her critics, as someone who,
quite frankly, I think the neoliberals need to, bump it up. They need to get people excited about, their party again. But I'm okay with the NDP taking control. Canadian politics has always been very similar to U.S. politics in terms of left and right. We've had two dominant parties the entire history of Canada. So NDP actually getting close enough to the crown, to really be a threat is very enticing, right? That's the exact kind of thing that I want to see as a, democracy fucker, right? That's a real term.
Who says crazy things all the time, was steady and calm and performed reasonably in the debate, so she surpassed expectations. And there's this big concept with them about things being baked in or not, and whether the concern that they are hearing at the doors as they campaign in Calgary about Danielle Smith, about her leadership, whether those concerns are already baked into the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. And this week, it feels like everything is colliding, and you do feel that the NDP is trying hard to emphasize not only the ways that they differ from the UCP, but all the flaws with the UCP, including the past 4 tough years under Jason Kenney and now under Danielle Smith.
One of the things I think, though, for the rest of the country,
really double down on their governing, on the Conservative governing, and just show the results. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. Well, it's not all you need to do. This is politics, right? So you got to sling some mud, but keep it based around politics. Like I said, the Canadian voter. There's a lot of apathy in Canadian politics. Most Canadians are checked out, but the people that are participating, the Canadians that are participating, are paying attention, and they're actually paying a lot of attention. It's kind of a, either or. You're either like really into it, really following it, or you're like, I don't fucking get both sides, and we'll go back to jerking it. It's that's what I've noticed, at least from in my time here so far.
Country, Chantal, watching this election, that's interesting is, depending on the outcome, how that might shift Ottawa's relationship with Alberta and the country's relationship with Alberta, depending on what kind of premier they get. One who really wants to be tough and independent versus one who might be a little more collaborative.
Looking at the federal-provincial makeup, I'd say that the first question is how isolated would Alberta be if the current government is reconducted versus whether if the NDP takes power. I don't sense that there is a lot of appetite in Ontario and Quebec to join Alberta in that kind of a fight, and certainly not in BC where the NDP is in power. So you're basically talking possibly more friction between Alberta and the rest of the country versus less. And I'm not saying that Rachel Notley would be an easy partner for any of the people that I'm talking about. But if I were Pierre Poilievre, I'm not sure that I would really wish for the election of a Conservative government next week, because he too will wear whatever Danielle Smith does, and that will not necessarily play well in Ontario.
I believe she's an extremist.
Yeah, it was interesting today. Pierre Poilievre
she's saying this extremist could potentially drag the entire Conservative Party down, because Pierre Poilievre is trying to convince Liberals that the Conservative Party is the right, and then you got Alberta over here. I'm a Conservative, and then slashing and cutting and privatizing, and and people are like, oh my God, this is terrible. So that's what she's talking about.
Do an endorsement video for Danielle Smith, and while it repeated a lot of the UCP lines that we've heard in the past from Ms. Smith herself about how Rachel Notley would be listening to her bosses in Ottawa, Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh. What is interesting to me is his decision, which is kind of late in the process. I mean, it polls, and this is the weekend where people are supposed to make their minds. It's interesting to me that he would come out. Stephen Harper had come out in April and endorsed Danielle Smith, but so many of the voters that Pierre Poilievre needs in Ontario are not going to look at this Danielle Smith endorsement and think like, this makes sense to me. And it also, I think, opens him up for not the first time, but on a big point of hypocrisy. He was very firm against Justin Trudeau and the SNC Lavalin thing. And here is Danielle Smith, arguably, I would argue, doing something far worse. And he says nothing about it, not that you would expect him to, but he endorses her. So I don't think that this was very strategically a wise move.
Andrew?
I would agree with that, and I think we have potentially trouble ahead of us as a country if Danielle Smith wins, and that's a big if. I mean, the most nervous people at this moment have to be the pollsters, because this is, I think, an insanely difficult election to model turnout, which will be absolutely determinant.
It's MAGA-style politics in Canada, and it would freak a lot of people out, and it would embolden a lot of scary people.
Of who wins with such close polling numbers. But if she does win, I know that the Alberta Sovereignty Act was not front and center in this election campaign, but you can bet your boots she's going to claim it as a mandate.
So if you hear everybody saying sovereignty, Alberta sovereignty, she wants to make Alberta its own country. She wants to separate it from Canada. Yeah. Usual nonsense. And I'm not a globalist because I don't think, conservatives separating, countries or states, separating states from their countries is a good idea. Hey, greetings from South Boston. It's your boy, Lenny. Wake the fuck up. Lenny's here. We're almost done with Canadian politics. Quit your snoozing. Everyone's snoozing. Sloth Boston. Everyone's snoozing in the chat, Lenny. They think Canadian politics is boring, Like, goddamn, just trying to be a little worldly here. I kind of live here. There's a couple million people over here in Canada. We're kind of relevant.
And a validation and vindication of it. And there are fights ahead on, emissions caps and other issues on the federal provincial file. Yeah. And I would not put it
Don't
all
you care
past
about
her
emissions
to
caps?
start invoking the act to try to wield it as a cudgel in those kinds of fights. She's got people around her advising her who are not on planet Earth, to be frank with you. And she has shown serially in the past that she's highly suggestible. She does not examine proposals that are put to her with nearly the kind of searching scrutiny she should. Yeah. And so
she's an extremist, right-wing extremist.
We could see some really quite radical proposals coming out of Edmonton, and I think we should all be bracing for it.
Kelly?
Yeah.
I just want to speak to Poilievre. I think, the fact that that endorsement is coming out today shows that the UCP is still worried. There are a lot of connections between Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre. They've known each other for 25 years. They both came from that Calgary school. And I think they do see eye to eye on a lot of issues like energy. And when we talk about the issues that are likely to be contentious, I think it's less going to be the Sovereignty Act, because a lot of people wonder how it's actually workable, and that is a major issue. Can you actually put it into place? What is going to be the big fight is over energy issues, over the cap that we're going to hear, the oil and gas emissions cap that we're going to hear more details on electricity, on Alberta withdrawing from the Canada pension plan. Some of these items that have flown under the radar, if the UCP
they're trying to destroy Canada. They really are. They're trying to destroy all the things I moved here for.
There's a lot of distance between Pierre Poilievre and Danielle Smith on a number of issues. Certainly, she could be a liability for him in some other parts of Canada, but they come from the same place.
Chantal?
Yes, and that would be a problem to Ontario voters. I watched Mr. Poilievre go through Quebec this week. Didn't have a stellar reception anywhere, including in ridings that he owns.
No one likes him.
Fault, but
he's a fucking scumbag, dude. He sucks.
He's not going to do well in Quebec. He absolutely needs to convince Ontario voters that he is the Prime Minister that they want, and this is not an association that will make Ontario voters look up and say, this is our guy.
Okay, well, we'll all be watching with great interest on Monday.
Yeah, no, my audience will not be watching. I guess they're over here snoozing away. They're snoozing away. Everybody take a little nap. Well, there you go, YouTube. That's my Canadian update. Hope you stayed awake to the end. God, you got my opinions throughout the thing there. Conservatives go away. You don't look. If there's one thing I want to say to conclude here is that if you're Canadian, you're watching this. Do not embrace a U.S. MAGA style politics. Okay. It is not, for the love of God, look at what it did to Britain. Okay? Stop. That would be my advice to the Canadian public at large, who, the two people that are going to view my YouTube video. Thank you so much, YouTube.